He's one of the most beloved musicians in history, but even Sir Paul McCartney had his limits. Behind the curtain of peace, love, and rock and roll, there were tensions, egos, and rivalries. He wasn't always the smiling Beatle with the thumbs-up pose. Behind the scenes, Paul could be sharp, opinionated, and fiercely protective of his art. And not every rock star vibed with that. Some clashed over music, others over money, and a few, just pure personality conflict. From simmering band drama to full-blown public feuds, Paul's journey through rock royalty wasn't all harmony. And today, we're diving into 5 rock stars Paul McCartney just couldn't stand, and why. Spoiler, it's not always who you'd expect. John Lennon, the complicated brother. They were songwriting soulmates, but by the end, they were bitter rivals. Paul and John Lennon were like fire and ice. Paul once said, John could be a bit of a bully sometimes. And John? He wasn't shy about calling Paul too bossy and too commercial. Their breakup wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The Beatles split shattered fans, but inside the band, the fractures had been growing for years. Artistic control, Yoko's presence, clashing egos, it all came to a head. John once famously said, I started the band. I dismantled it. And Paul, blindsided by the official announcement, felt betrayed. Their post-breakup years were marked by public jabs, legal battles, and a heavy silence that lasted far too long. Paul admitted later, I would dream about him, and I'd wake up crying. And yet, behind the bitterness was a strange, enduring love. Late in John's life, the two had begun writing letters, even talking about working together again. But fate had other plans. The loss of Lennon in 1980 didn't just end a friendship, it left a hole Paul never quite filled. The brotherhood was broken, but never forgotten. Yoko Ono, the unwelcome disruption. Paul's dislike for Yoko Ono wasn't just tabloid gossip, it was palpable. Many claim her constant presence during recording sessions threw off the group's dynamic. Paul once said, it was like having a guest in your office 24/7. Even decades later, McCartney admitted they were never close. But it went deeper than personal discomfort. The Beatles had always operated as a tight creative unit, for equals in a fragile balance. Yoko's sudden, intimate involvement in everything from jam sessions to business meetings felt, to some, like an invasion. For Paul, it wasn't just about Yoko, it was about the shift in John. The bond they once had, the Lennon-McCartney engine that drove the band, began to misfire. Still, time softened some edges. Paul later acknowledged that Yoko made John happy, and maybe that was enough. She wasn't the cause, he said in an interview years later, but she was certainly part of the chaos. In the end, Yoko became a symbol, not of blame, but of the uncomfortable truth. The Beatles were changing, and no one, not even Paul, could stop it. Noel Gallagher, the loud critic. Oasis frontman Noel Gallagher famously declared, we're bigger than the Beatles. That didn't sit well with Paul McCartney, or much of the world. While Paul kept it classy in public, sources close to the Beatles say he dismissed Noel as arrogant and desperate to be relevant. The quiet shade Paul threw in later interviews? Brutal and unmistakably sharp. In one subtle dig, McCartney joked, it's always nice when bands think they're the next big thing, especially when they say it out loud. Noel, of course, didn't back down. He doubled down. At least we write our own songs, mate, he quipped in a radio interview, fueling an already simmering media firestorm. Their feud never became all-out war, but the tension remained part of British pop folklore, one a timeless icon, the other a proud provocateur. And in typical Gallagher fashion, Noel later softened his tone, slightly. Paul's a genius. But I wouldn't take back what I said. It shook things up, that's what rock and roll's about. Say what you will, Noel knew how to make headlines. And Paul? He knew how to end them with a smirk. Phil Spector, the unwanted producer. Phil Spector may have been a legendary producer, but Paul hated what he did to Let It Be. McCartney despised the overproduction, especially the addition of sweeping strings and a choir on The Long and Winding Road. To Paul, the lush orchestration felt bloated, sentimental, and worst of all, unauthorized. He hadn't approved those changes. It wasn't his Beatles anymore. It was no longer a band. It was something else, McCartney later said. And I didn't sign off on that. The tension over Spector's version became one of the final cracks in the already fracturing Beatles. Paul even cited it in the legal documents when he sued to dissolve the band. Years later, in 2003, he got his revenge and closure. Let It Be. Naked, a stripped-down remix of the album, was released without Spector's embellishments. It was raw, direct, and closer to what Paul always intended. Phil Spector may have had a golden touch in the studio, but to McCartney, he tarnished something sacred. Michael Jackson, the backstabbing businessman. They collaborated. They laughed. They made hits like Say Say Say. It wasn't just music, it was friendship. Or so Paul thought. But in 1985, everything changed. When Michael Jackson outbid Paul McCartney for the rights to the Beatles song catalog, a treasure trove of Lennon-McCartney classics, it felt like the ultimate betrayal. Paul had once advised Michael to invest in music publishing. Michael listened, and then used that very advice to snap up the crown jewels of Paul's legacy. Paul was stunned. "I thought he was a friend," he once said. "Business is business," Michael reportedly told him, but for Paul, it was personal. The move created a rift that never fully healed. McCartney lobbied for years to regain control of his songs, but the sting of that moment lingered far beyond the contracts and courtrooms. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was also a ruthless businessman. And in this chapter of music history, friendship took a backseat to ownership. Even legends have their feuds. And while McCartney has always carried himself with grace, these 5 names struck a sour chord in the life of a music icon. Backstage egos, creative clashes, personal digs that went public. For someone known as the Nice Beatle, Paul's had his fair share of rivalries, and not all of them were with John. Some were fleeting tensions. Others turned into full-blown Cold Wars with chart-topping soundtracks. And in true rock and roll fashion, some were mended, on stage, under the lights. Who surprised you most on this list? Was it a longtime collaborator? A fellow Beatle? Or someone you'd never expect? Drop a comment below and tell us whose side you're on, and why. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another untold rock and roll story, feud, or fallout. Until next time, keep your vinyl spinning, your takes hot, and your gossip vintage.